Hi, and welcome to the Colorado Dragon Boat Film Festival. My name is Jennifer Samuel, and I am here to do a Q&A with the director of Quezon's Game, Matt Rosen. And I can tell you that it's such a remarkable story. Being a Filipino American, I never knew this from history books or even from storytelling, and I was very choked up. And I am so honored to be doing the Q&A for Matt Rosen. And so, Matt, can you tell me just a little bit about you?
Okay, well, I am Matthew Rosen. I co-wrote with my wife the original spec script for the movie. I directed it, and I was also the cinematographer for it.
Again, a history lesson for me. How did you find out about the story?
Okay. I'm Jewish. So I was born in London, and I grew up in London. And I came to the Philippines to do a TV show in the mid-80s. We did the show, and Laurie, who is now my wife and the producer of this movie, was working on this TV show that I was doing then. We got married, and we fell in love first, and then we got married, and we went back to England to see my parents and have a honeymoon. And when we were there, I can't remember exactly what it was, if it was a bar mitzvah or a wedding. I can't actually remember, but I remember Chavanagila came up, and Laurie knew all the words to it. And I was very intrigued. How come you know Chavanagila? Now, Laurie thought it was a Philippine dialect. She didn't realize it was in Hebrew. So when we got back to the Philippines, we went to the synagogue here, because apparently everybody of Laurie's age used to sing Chavanagila in the back streets. You know, it was one of those things they used to sing in the streets. So when we got back, I went to the synagogue and asked them, how come Filipinos know Chavanagila? And they have this little museum of sorts in the back of the synagogue with lots of photographs, artifacts, stories on the Jewish community in Manila. And that's where they told me about Quezon, how he brought the Jews over to the Philippines, and how that culture mixed just after the war. And that's why children sing Chavanagila in the streets of Manila.
Oh, wow. I mean, I didn't realize how intertwined the stories and the people were in this movie. I just was I was reading about it, and then I went ahead and watched the movie, and then I read a little bit about you. So having personally experienced anti-Semitism, how do you feel like we are now on this path? Do you feel like we're on the right path?
Well, overall, yes, regardless of what you see in the news. I really do believe we're on the right path in terms of all sorts of bigotry. One of the things that I wanted to put forward in the movie, because the movie really is about a very dark time in our history. And I didn't want the movie to be a depressing Holocaust movie, because it's it's about something that is quite wonderful. It's about, somebody who believed in something that was right, and put his whole career and life on the line and did something that he thought was right. So that was what I wanted to put into the movie, as opposed to the horror of the Holocaust. Because in general, what I feel that Quezon did then, we have to remember that he was the only one. And would that happen again today? It might, but I don't think he would be the only one today. I think a majority of people would be in the same mindset as Quezon, that you have to do the right thing. So when you look at it that way, yes, definitely we are moving in the right direction. Another thing is, it's only 60, 70 years since this happened, and how far we have come from where we were during the Second World War, I think is a very important thing to put across. And the other thing is, although we're seeing a lot of bigotry in the world right now, because it's popular for the news right now, since I have been in the Philippines, because I grew up through the 60s and 70s in London, where there was quite a lot of anti-Semitism. I used to go to a Jewish school, and I remember you wouldn't be able to leave the school of an evening at 4 o'clock. You ran down the high street as fast as you could, or you got on the bus as fast as you could, because the guys from the neighboring school will be running after you with a 2x4. You know, it was really like that. And I used to ask my dad about it, and it's just part of being Jewish, you know, that's the human condition. And still that at that period in time, my parents felt England was the safest place for a Jew to live in Europe at that time. Since I arrived in the Philippines in '84, I have never come across any form of bigotry, from being a foreigner or from being a Jew. And you just don't see it here. And I think it was something that I felt I had to show the world. You know, it wasn't just Quezon who did this. It's really the culture of the Filipino people that did it. And it's a culture that I think needs to be understood more around the world. So that was one of the reasons why I did the movie.
I love that. There was such a beautiful scene when Quezon and he was dancing with his daughter, and she asked her dad, "Why does this have to be you?" And he responds with a little dialogue later, "It doesn't have to be me." Well, the question is not why I choose to help, but rather why not no one else will. And that moment of like vulnerability and just his courage, do you believe that's the type of man and father he was?
Yes. We didn't go into this we didn't go into this to make him a hero. In fact, you've seen the film, and I definitely show both sides of his character. Although this movie is about the goodness that he did, he was no angel. And I hope that comes across in the film. He was a good man, but he was no angel. The thing there is that was the point when I was being told the story. The point really that I got was not that Quezon would do this, because nowadays a lot of people would do it. For me, what was important was that nobody else did. Why was it Quezon that did it? Why was it only Quezon that did it? In terms of world leaders, there were other heroes like Schindler and the Chinese ambassador also that we showed in the first place, Chinese ambassador to Austria. There were a lot of individual heroes, but only one world leader, really.
So, talking about the world leaders, then how accurate is it to history?
That's a very good question, and I like that question. I like that question because a lot of people bring it up. They don't ask the question; they just tell me, "Oh, that was wrong." What we did with the story was I wanted it to be very true to history. I wanted to capture what actually happened, and we did a lot of research. Laurie and I have been actually working on this for 10 years prior to the movie, gathering all the research. And it's not easy to find because it's a story that got lost. And we were very lucky because we came across the actual report of Alex Frieda, his own report written after the events, which we assume will be the most accurate to what is written in history. But we also spoke to all the families rather than historians. Oh, I should say, as well as historians. But we felt the families had the story down more complete than the historians. There are about 3 official accounts of what happened, 3 books or documentaries, and we studied all of them. But this is a movie, which is what I want to point out. It's not a documentary. And movies have different boundaries to the documentary. Not only is it a historical movie, so it should be based on fact, but it also has to provoke emotion, and it has to be entertaining. And there are some rules in script writing, which meant that we couldn't stick exactly to the history. And I had to take some license to make the film work. But these licenses do not change the main guts of what happened. The
Maybe
yeah, the most important thing I think was I compressed it, because these things took 3 years from the time that they decided to bring in the Jews to the time that they actually brought it in. And I didn't want a movie that skipped from one period to another period, because I feel you lose the flow. So I deliberately, after setting the date in the beginning, I never went back to the date. And it feels like it was over a short period of time, but it was actually over 3 years. But I don't like movies that are set, that are segmented into periods of time. The only thing that we couldn't validate in terms of history was nobody actually knows how the decision of America to bar immigration was changed, or not how, but why. So that was never, we know that it was, and we know that these 3 senators came from the States, and they decided, yes, it was. But the hearing we have at the end, I'm afraid it didn't actually happen. That is licensed. What actually happened was the 3 senators sat down separately with all the characters involved, Eisenhower, McNutt, and Quezon, and they spoke to them individually. But that would have been a very long movie. So I took license to put them all in the same room, but we're not quite sure what it was that changed their minds, because that's not documented.
So we just presented the premise.
Yeah, so we presented a premise.
I get it. So talking about history, and if they were to show that your movie in schools, I noticed like a lot of the gentlemen, I mean, in the summary, it says they're playing poker, they're smoking cigars, and in an extra, if we were to show this to schools, do you think about the impression it may have like on children based on like, I mean, it's history, and this is kind of how it went, and that's how, you smoke over cigars and whiskey or whatever it may be. How do you think that impression it may have on children?
Yes, well, I did take this very much into account when I started to do the movie, because I am a bit of an anti-smoker. I do a lot of commercials, but I don't do alcohol and tobacco because I just don't want to teach kids to do that. I personally, if you want to do it, it's up to you, but I wouldn't want to promote it. The thing is that every photograph you ever see of this group of friends together, they always constantly have a cigar in their mouth. It was at a period when we didn't know it was bad for you. In fact, when Quezon was diagnosed with tuberculosis, he was told to switch to menthol cigars because they thought the smoke cleaned the lungs. So everybody smoked at that time. And when you think of world leaders like Churchill, you don't think of Churchill without a cigar in his mouth, or people of that period like Groucho Marx. You just don't think of them without a cigar. They always had one. And I was thinking, how am I going to present this? Another issue is that the Frieda brothers, who really are also great heroes of this movie, and not just this movie, but heroes to the Jewish community in general around the world, because they saved, what they did in the Philippines was just a fraction of what they did around the world in terms of saving Jews from the Nazis. But their business was cigars. They made, their business in the Philippines was tobacco, and tobacco at the time was the Philippines' largest export. So for me to ignore it, I couldn't do. So what I wanted to do was make it as unappetizing as possible. Now, Quezon gets tuberculosis throughout the movie, and he dies of it eventually. So that, I mean, it just goes to show, you smoke, you die. But what I wanted to do was make it so foul that it would not be an advertisement for smoking or enticing to youngsters at all. I hope when they look at it, they feel horrible, because there's just smoke everywhere. There's one scene towards the end where Quezon is already suffering from tuberculosis. He's weak. He's already been in a hospital. He doesn't know if he's going to survive to the end of his term. And he walks into the room, I don't know if you remember this, through clouds of smoke. And they're still smoking. They don't realize that they're killing him. And I'm hoping that puts across that everybody did it because it was done, but it was killing everybody. I hope it came across. One other thing that I'd like to point out is that nobody smoked any tobacco during this movie. It was all done with practical and post effects. So the cigars that they had were mock-ups. They weren't real. Although they were wrapped with tobacco leaves, they were mechanical. They had tiny vapes on the inside. And the vape was water-based, and it had no nicotine. It was just basically water laced with the stuff that actually smokes. So that was inside the cigar, which is why, if you look at it, I'm going to give something away here. The cigars never get any smaller. So they're always smoking big cigars because that was the mechanism we had inside. Then the other problem that as a filmmaker you have when you do cigars and cigarettes is that smoke doesn't stick to continuity. So if I'm shooting one scene and the smoke is bellowing in one way, when I cut to the other side and it's not there, it will be obvious. So we used a lot of smoke machines, but also we generated a lot of that smoke. So if someone would puff out smoke and you cut to the next frame, that smoke actually probably is not real because it's very unlikely it would be in the same place. So, and the fire at the end of the cigars, that's all post-production. That was all computer graphics. So that's how we did the smoking. And at the end of the movie, I actually put a disclaimer. And as far as I know, we're the first film in history to use a disclaimer that says no tobacco was consumed during the making of this movie. I hope that all that together does not entice anybody to start taking up cigars.
Well, wonderfully done. So what is next for Matthew Rosen? What's on the agenda and the plate? Because now it just got me wanting to pull out more history lessons, more films. That it's almost like those letters that you find in a trunk or something. That this type of movie made me realize what I need to uncover, not just from history books, but just from the little things that we don't see and we don't hear. So what's next for you?
I think the first thing for us is a vaccine. So nothing's happening until we get vaccinated. So the first thing for us is a vaccination. But yes, we have, during this downtime that we've all been in quarantine here, we have been working on a few films. We have 2 historical films coming up. When I was doing Quezon's Game, I discovered 2 other parts of history that are actually incredibly interesting. One is about the history of the Philippines and the Jews that goes right back to the Spanish Inquisition, which is very interesting. And another one is about the Korean War and something that happened there. And we're waiting for our vaccine and we're waiting for somebody to give us the funds. And then we're away.
There we go. 2 important pieces, right?
Yeah.
Very important.
Yeah.
Well, I loved our conversation. I loved the movie. The fact that I can see a part of even my grandfather when he still writes down a lot of his, he was in World War II as well. And he wrote down a lot of things that I've read and it matched up. And it made me very proud and it made me very choked up too as well. So I enjoyed the movie. So I cannot wait to hear and see more of what you got. So bring in the funds and bring on the vaccine.